A Mark Brown Arthur chapter book. Arthur and the Bad Luck Brain. Text by Stephen Krensky. Based on a teleplay by Gerard Lewis. Chapter 1. It was a beautiful day for a softball game. The sun was shining. The sky was blue. Unfortunately, the team from Lakewood Elementary School was paying little attention to the weather. Arthur, Buster, Binky, Francine, Muffy, and the Brain were sitting together on the bench and none of them were smiling. "Take me out of the ballgame." Binky was singing to anyone who would listen. "Excuse me, Binky," said the Brain. "I think you mean, take me out to the ballgame. That's the way the song goes." Binky shook his head. "No, I mean just what I said. I want out of this ballgame. We stink." The Brain wasn't about to argue with him. Their third-grade team was going down in flames. They were losing badly to Mighty Mountain, one of their biggest rivals. The score was 10-0. "There's not much time left," said Arthur. "No kidding," said Francine. "It's the bottom of the ninth with one out." "There's always time for a miracle," Buster insisted. "Come on, George," he shouted. George was at the plate with a full count on him, 3 balls and 2 strikes. In came the pitch and George gave it his best swing. And missed. "Strike 3, called out the umpire. The Brain stood up and put chalk on his hands. "Now there are 2 outs. Francine reminded him. "You're the only one who can help us now." The Brain straightened up. "You mean help us win?" "No," said Muffy. "Just help us avoid complete humiliation." Buster shoved a bat into the Brain's hands. "Use this one," he said. "It's new. Got a lot of hits left in it." "I don't believe bats are actually made with a specific number of hits," said the Brain. "Even modern science has its limitations." Yeah, said Buster. "Meanwhile, don't forget to spit on the handle." The Brain frowned. "Why would I do that? It's not hygienic. In fact, it's almost disgusting." The Brain walked to the plate and stood ready. The first pitch blew by him. "Strike 1, called the umpire. "Just do it," shouted Buster. "It's lucky." "Spitting isn't lucky," the Brain insisted. "It's only a good way to spread germs." The second ball whizzed by him as well. "Strike 2, said the umpire. "Come on, Brain. You can do it. We really need a hit." The Brain called for time and stepped out of the batter's box. He looked back at the bench. "Don't worry. It's all a question of knowing the ratio of ball speed to its trajectory. After compensating for the air resistance, of course." On the next pitch, he swung hard and sent the ball soaring. Up it went. "Go, Brain, go! Turn on the jets." The Brain started running around the bases. He passed first and rounded towards second. The ball was coming down now. Down. It landed with a thud in the left fielder's mitt. 3 outs, called the umpire. "This game's over. Mighty Mountain wins, 10-0. Chapter 2. It could have happened to anyone, said the Brain, walking home with Buster, Arthur, Francine, and Muffy. "It had nothing to do with me refusing to expectorate." "Huh," said Buster. "Spit," said the Brain. "Not spitting on the bat wasn't a factor." "How can you be so sure?" said Arthur. "It's a tradition like smashing a champagne bottle against the side of a new ship. All the pros do it." It's not all the brain's fault, said Buster. I should have worn my lucky hat. Francine sighed. And I should have worn my lucky socks. The brain shook his head. You guys should hear what you sound like. We didn't lose because of bad luck. We lost because they were better than we were today. Yeah, said Muffy. And luckier, too. The brain laughed. You're not serious, are you? I mean, people have had superstitious beliefs since the dawn of civilization. But no one has ever proven them to be true. Yeah, said Buster. That's what those crazy scientists want you to think. Just because they can't prove something with their formulas and Bunsen burners, they say it isn't true. On behalf of scientists everywhere, I must. The brain began. Don't move, cried Buster. Huh? Why not? Look! A black cat padded across the sidewalk in front of them and stopped to rub its back against a fire hydrant. We have to go the other way, said Buster. A black cat has crossed our path. Yup, said Francine. We'll have to walk around. Way around, said Arthur. Muffy sighed. I wish I'd called for the limo. The brain frowned. None of you have been listening to a word I've said. I listened, said Buster. You said that no one's ever proven a superstition true. But that doesn't mean they aren't. Look. He pointed across the street where Mr. Ratburn was walking along the sidewalk. Ahead of him was a tall ladder with an open can of paint perched at the top. I'll bet you even Mr. Ratburn doesn't walk under that ladder. They all watched. Sure enough, Mr. Ratburn came up to the ladder, glanced up, and walked quickly around it. See, said Buster. He knows it's bad luck to walk under a ladder. The brain snorted. It's also common sense. Why walk under a ladder and an open can of paint? It might fall on you. Which would be unlucky, said Buster. Exactly my point. That's a terrible argument, the brain insisted. Call it what you want, it's still the truth. Buster turned to go and almost stepped on a crack in the sidewalk. Whoa! That was a close one. Step on a crack, break your mother's back. He continued down the block, awkwardly avoiding the cracks in his way. It'll be dark before you get home, the brain shouted after him. It'll be worth it, Arthur explained. Where his mother's health is concerned, Francine added, why take chances? The brain rolled his eyes. This superstition thing had to be stopped, and he was the one to do just that. Chapter 3. Outside the brain's house, Muffy, Arthur, Binky, Buster, and Francine all sat on folding chairs. The brain stood quietly before them, wearing a lab coat and holding a pointer. Next to him were some props he had collected. There was an open stepladder, a small sign pointing to a crack in the sidewalk, and a mirror in a cardboard box. Off to one side was a poster stand holding a big chart. Thank you, said the brain, for agreeing to come to my experiment. Are you going to blow something up? Asked Binky. I love it when you blow things up. Sorry, Binky. Nothing so dramatic today. But it's still important for you to be here. I need witnesses. Is this like a trial? Asked Francine. I want to be the judge. No, said the brain. It's not a trial. Just an exhibition. He paused. I'd like to draw your attention to Exhibit A, the open ladder. It still sounds like a trial to me, Francine muttered. Brain, what are you doing? At that moment the brain was walking under the ladder. "Are you crazy?" Arthur said. "That's bad luck," said Buster. The brain ignored them and walked under the ladder several more times just to make his point. "Remember," he said, "you're all witnesses. Now for Exhibit B, the crack." The brain broke into a tap dance, his feet landing squarely on the sidewalk crack again and again. "Hey, what about your mother?" asked Buster. "You're taking her life in your hands, feet." "Nonsense," said the brain. "Poppycock, I might add." He moved over to the window. "And finally, Exhibit C. You may want to stand back a bit." He picked up the mirror and dropped it in the box. The mirror broke into several pieces. Everyone gasped. "Now you've done it," said Arthur. "That's 7 years of bad luck." The brain walked over to his chart. "Nonsense. There is no such thing. And I'm going to prove it. Over the next few days I will keep track of any bad things that happen to me. If there is no dramatic increase from the usual number, I will have established the evidence that superstitions are false." He pointed to his friends with a sweeping gesture. "And you will all be witnesses." Francine bit her lip. "Aren't you even a little bit scared?" she asked. The brain folded his arms. "Science does not scare easily." At that moment, a clap of thunder rumbled overhead, and it started to rain. "I'm getting out of here." "Me, too." "I don't want to catch his bad luck. He's cursed." Everyone except the brain ran away. "Oh, come on," said the brain. "I knew it was going to rain. See? I even brought an umbrella." The brain opened the umbrella. It kept him dry for a moment before a gust of wind blew it out of his hands. And then the brain got soaked. Chapter 4. That night at dinner, the brain was telling his parents about his day. "And you wouldn't believe it," he said, "but all my friends really believe in this superstitious stuff." "Some traditions have a long history," said his father. "And old habits are hard to break," added his mother. I know," said the brain. "Still, you'd think they'd demand some proof, some shred of evidence. The whole thing is based on coincidence and fear." He paused to cut his pork chop, but his knife slipped and fell to the floor. "Oops," said his mother. "You dropped a knife. You know what that means? We're going to get a male visitor." The brain frowned. "Mom, you don't really believe that, do you? Haven't you been listening to what I was saying? All that stuff was cooked up by a bunch of..." The doorbell rang. "Who can that be at this hour?" asked the brain's father. A little surprised, the brain went to get the door. Even if someone had come to visit, that didn't mean it was a male visitor. And even if it was, well, the odds of that were 50-50 in any case. He opened the door and sighed. Binky was standing there. "Hi, Brain." "Hi, Binky." "Brain, I was wondering. I bet you don't know what 96 divided by 12 is." "Sure I do. It's 8. "Thanks," said Binky. He pulled out a piece of paper and wrote down the number. "How about 8 times 8, he asked. 64. "Aw." Binky wrote that number on the paper, too. He started to ask another case tie-in, but the brain spoke first. "Do you want to come in, Binky? We're just finishing dinner. Once we're done, you and I can work on our homework together. Why don't you head up to my room, and I'll be right there." "Oh, well," said Binky, "if you insist." When the brain joined BrimQ a few minutes later, he found him staring at the bookcase. "You've got a lot of books here," said BrimQ. "That's true," the brain admitted. "And they have small print. A lot of words are crammed in there." The brain smiled. "Very true. So, let's get to work." He looked around for his backpack. "BrimQ, you didn't move anything in here, did you?" Just that raptor model. I thought it was staring at me. So I turned it toward the wall." "That's okay. But what about my backpack? I always put it right there on my chair." "Haven't seen it," said BrimQ. The brain sighed. "I must have left it at school." "Bad luck," said BrimQ, throwing himself on the bed. "But it's not a total loss. At least we can do our math." He held up his sheet of paper. "I've got questions, and you've got answers." "I guess," said the brain. He still didn't believe in luck, good or bad, but he wasn't quite as sure as he had been before. Chapter 5. The brain was walking alone deep inside a dark forest. He didn't like being alone, but he didn't remember having a choice in the matter. All kinds of noises could be heard in the gloomy underbrush. There were screeches and grunts and chatterings, none of which sounded very friendly. "I'm lost," he said to himself. "But it's not because I'm unlucky. It's just because I don't know where I am. If I can just find a clearing, I'll take my bearings from the sun. Science can beat luck any day." At that moment he burst into just the kind of clearing he was hoping for. "Aha!" he shouted. "My luck is changing." Or it would be, he thought quickly, if there were such a thing. He looked up at the sun just before it disappeared behind a bank of clouds. Then it started to rain. Lightning flashed, followed by a roar of thunder. Perfectly natural, thought the brain. We see the lightning before we hear the thunder simply because light travels faster than sound. What wasn't so natural, though, was seeing that the thunder had disturbed a herd of wild four-leaf clovers. They started to run in panic, bearing down on the defenseless brain. "Oh, no!" he cried. "I'll be trampled to death." He began running, but he could hear the clovers getting closer and closer and the brain bolted up in bed. Thank goodness it had only been a dream. But wait, he was wet. But how could that be? The rain had been only in his dream. Suddenly, a drop of water hit him on the forehead. The brain looked up. Huh? Then another drop hit him. And a third. The brain frowned and climbed out of bed to look out the window. It was raining. The water must be leaking in through the roof, he realized. No wonder I got wet. That's not bad luck. These things just happen. A little later the brain settled himself on the floor. He had placed a bucket on his